Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Life Hacks podcast on True Story FM. I'm Shelly Boucher. Sometimes life feels like yesterday's stale fast food. It's passable, but do you love it? Well, let's love life together. Here, we explore simple, clever ways to make your life better and less stale. Guests from all walks of life grant insight into their approach to making life more enjoyable, less stressful, and filled with abundance. I am so excited for today's guest. It is Dr. Foxy Fit, aka my friend Mallory Fox. Now, Mallory is an awesome health and wellness coach and has designed a really great program where she helps busy people make more time for self-care through mindful movement of not only your body, but also your mind. And Mallory, I'm going to let you take it away from there.
Thank you for the introduction and thanks for having me today. I feel very inspired after hearing your introduction and what you're up to on this podcast. I think we can all use a little bit more inspiration in our lives, especially, being a year into the pandemic. I know that I'll just speak for myself, definitely feel that law of day-to-day life at home. So what I love to do is help busy people make time for themselves. And I learned how to do that through having a traumatic brain injury and losing my eyesight in one eye just a few years ago from a car accident. So before that, what I call like my old life, I was super busy. I worked 14-hour days. I did a lot of volunteer work. I just got married. Today, fun fact, is actually my third wedding anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
And shout out to Brian, my husband. So this car accident happened and I'd just been married for 4 months and my life kind of just changed overnight. And I all of a sudden went from living on the go, running my own business and having this really full and busy life to not being able to get off my couch other than to go to physical therapy, go to the neurologist, go to all these doctor's appointments and therapy appointments, and just physically really, really unwell. But I had all of this free time, but not really very able to take care of myself. And was very miserable and not really sure how to make space for self-care when I couldn't go and do something. So that's kind of where this mindful movement idea came from for me.
Your car accident is huge, and I'm so glad you brought that up right away. But also just your training is also all about in the physical body and things like that.
Yeah, I'm a big nerd. So I have a doctorate of health sciences and a master's in kinesiology, which is human movement, and a bunch of certifications in personal training and corrective exercise, yoga, mindfulness, all of these other things.
So what's neat about you is like you went through all this training and then life came along and said, hey, Mallory, we're going to give you an opportunity to actually have to live what you've learned. So you had to put all of it together.
I was very good at telling other people what to do. So other people would come to me and, they'd have things happen where they would need my help to create a plan to help them get back, to where they used to be. And I was great at, helping them to do that. But then life happened to me and I needed to essentially get back to where I used to be. And then all of a sudden it wasn't really fun anymore. It was my turn to go through that work.
Tell us a little bit how you managed to do that, because when you're, how they say doctors' kids are always sick and shoemakers' kids are always barefoot. You had to doctor yourself. Was there a bigger challenge out of all that?
I had a ton of support. I want to say that too. So I was in occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech therapy, all of these other things. So brain injury, our brains are responsible for everything that we do, for everything from sleep to every single function that we have. So I had a ton of medical support as well as, every type of support you can imagine. But when it came to putting all of the pieces together and advocating for myself, that was all on me because, if you were to look at me, I looked completely fine. I looked the way that I looked before the accident. And I had to explain, what was going on. You couldn't look at me and see that, I was dizzy and that my vision was double and, that all of these things were happening. I found that I really turned to mindfulness to just clear some space for me to be able to take a deep breath. Because as crazy as it sounds, Shelly, it was hard to even breathe in that time. And I'd never experienced that before. But, we take breathing so for granted. And, in the time between like doctor's appointments and between like Ubering to my doctor's appointments, because I couldn't drive. I was legally blind in one eye. Having to remind myself to take a deep breath was something that I'd never had to do before.
Right.
And it really brought back a lot of stories that I'd heard from clients over the years. And I worked with, in my office, Foxy Fitness, I worked with a lot of doctors. I worked with a lot of high-powered attorneys. I worked with CEOs. I worked with professional athletes. And these people would describe to me this state of stress that they lived in, how, they performed at a really high level in all of these areas of life, but they really struggled to find the time and space for themselves. And I had this kind of epiphany where I realized I was going through that as well. I was able to realize, kind of step out of the situation and say, okay, if I can see like what's the bare minimum that I can do right now? Like if I were my client, what would I do? Like I have the medical advice, I have, all of the different therapists that are telling me this, but what's the piece that's missing? And the piece that was missing for me was that moment to moment self-care.
Wow. So I want to talk about both the mental stretching that you obviously had to do and physical stretching, and we can talk about it in any order. But what I really think is interesting, just starting, let's say, on the mental side, like I know people always talk about meditation and that kind of mindfulness. And I am one of those people that I find actually meditation anxiety inducing, which I kind of feel like maybe you were in that space, but you had to learn to be more mindful. So how did you make that move from being somebody who talked about it to doing it with yourself?
I hated meditation and mindfulness. And, I said earlier, I was really good at telling other people what to do. And I was not very good because I didn't have to do those things before my accident. I was privileged to, be in good health, be in good shape, not have to, quote, meditate for stress. And so even though I taught meditation and I taught yoga, I didn't practice it myself. And I was really, really bad. I was the person in yoga who at the end, if you've ever taken a yoga class, at the end, you're supposed to clear your mind and take a little rest. They call it Shavasana. And the yoga teacher might talk about, letting all of your thoughts go. And I would lie there and probably curse like as a teacher and kind of like count all of the things on my to-do list that I still had to do and, wasting time because my mind just wouldn't stop. And, I know from a scientific standpoint, our brains don't just naturally switch off. And from a scientific standpoint, when we're in survival mode, our brains will do whatever it takes to keep us surviving to the next day. So while we can train the brain through meditation and mindfulness, if you aren't naturally, quote, good at mindfulness, that's not a bad thing. It just means that, you're living in a stressed state. So what I did, because I wasn't good at meditation, I would get, as you mentioned, kind of anxiety from having to try to clear my head or start a meditation, even if it was 5 minutes long, and just not be able to stick with it. I would notice like every 5 seconds, maybe that my mind was wandering, and my inner voice would be like, Mallory, come on, it's just a meditation. Like, just listen to it. They're telling you what to do. Like, come on, get with it. My inner voice would be really harsh and like, come on, just do it. And so what I did instead was I would just start really small, like with 10 seconds. Over time, I still struggle, I'll be honest, with finding that space of like a calm mind. But the difference now is that I don't beat myself up over it.
There you go.
Because I know that we're human and our minds aren't meant to just go blank at the drop of a hat.
Right. And I really like that idea of the building blocks of like, okay, today I can do 1 minute. Maybe tomorrow I can make it for 2. But forget 5 minutes.
Yeah. Or it might be one breath. It might be like, if I can take one deep breath right here, then that's one more deep breath than I was, taking yesterday. And what mindfulness really is it's just noticing life as it unfolds. And what I used to think was that, mindfulness was, when you're on vacation and there's not a care in the world, you're at this beautiful beach and you have a margarita in your hand and, you have no worries about what you're coming home to. Life is just perfect. Like, I thought that's what mindfulness was. Like, all of these variables that are all perfectly set. But mindfulness is really just noticing life as it unfolds around you without judgment about it.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, mindfulness might be that, we're in the middle of a podcast interview and my dog starts barking and I just notice that my dog's barking without getting, pulled into that.
Right. It's also, I think, very much staying present in the moment that you're in. That's what it sounds like to me.
And that's what it is.
One thing that you do that I love, this thing that you do is you started, and I subscribed to it once we met, is your mindful minute text. And that's like the perfect life hack. That's ingenious.
Thank you. So, being a recovering perfectionist, I've noticed that a lot of people, that was the biggest stumbling block for me with starting mindfulness. I wanted to be good at mindfulness. If I was going to make time to, try something new, I wanted to see benefits and I wanted to eventually be good at it. Otherwise, why else would I do something? And so I started the Mindful Minute because I wanted to help other people find the benefits of mindfulness too. I know how much it's helped me in my life. So what it is, for those who don't know, is I send a text every day. And it's a very short mindfulness prompt. I'll tell you a secret. I really do it for myself because without like a daily reminder for myself, I'm not likely to remember to practice mindfulness every single day. So it's really nice for me to have that community of other people who I know are relying or, waiting for a text. Or I've even had it happen where like one day I forgot to send out a text message and someone actually sent me a message and was like, hey, I think you might have a problem with your software. I just didn't get my prompt today. And I was like, thank you so much for letting me know. I actually forgot to send it. So I created something that I needed for myself.
Oh, it's great. And they're just simple things. Go take 3 deep breaths. It's like, oh, I'm in the middle of my day. I wish I'd thought of that. And then you remind me.
Yeah, that little ping to just, hey, whatever you're doing right now, just stop and notice what you're doing. I go about a lot of my day being mindless. And so many of us do. I eat in front of the TV. I, answer emails while I'm listening to a podcast and my husband's talking while I, drive. And there's all these different things, our brains are processing so much at once. And after my brain injury is when I really noticed how much we tried to multitask. Because after my brain injury, I couldn't multitask. I had to peel back all of those layers to just do one thing at a time. And that's really where I had the opportunity to practice mindfulness because I kind of got forced into only being able to have the capacity to focus on one thing at a time. And then, you were asking like kind of where that came from. And that's where it all started, where the things that helped me to try on mindfulness and to give myself the time and the space to just practice it without having like a goal or an expectation of what it might look like.
That's great. I love the idea of having less expectations of us for perfectionists because I find that in myself all the time between, my work and my kids and just my house or other things. And then sometimes your own wellness totally falls to the side because you're so focused on those other things. And if you slow down, I find that if I'm well, then in the right brain space, everything else goes so much better. And it seems obvious when we say it out loud, but so often in life, we forget.
Well, I love what you just said. And it's so true. And you point out, like, as a mom, and I don't have kids, but I do have two little dogs, and if I have to put feeding them before feeding me, I'll generally feed them first. And I can imagine having human children, you probably prioritize their needs before yours.
I hope so. I don't know.
I see that in moms all the time. Again, in clients that I work with, and again, when I was recovering from my brain injury, I would just have all these stories. I've worked probably over 20,000 hours with clients over the years. And all of these stories and, clients who beat themselves up about excelling in so many areas of life, but then in their words, failing when it comes to taking care of their own health and their own needs. And really that not understanding why they couldn't put their needs first. And so it's a really human problem, I think, in our society.
Right. We're always trying to do better, be better, but sometimes we forget what the building blocks are. And that's a really good transition into so much of your other background, which is physical stretching, which that's when you and I met, is because you were on at a video shoot as a stretching expert, which I was like, I'd never even heard of such a thing. And the more I got to hear about all the things you did, I was just amazed by it, how important stretching is for also your wellness. So stretching your brain, big thing, but also I want to hear your, some thoughts on you with stretching your body.
Yeah, where to start on that?
So how about just why is stretching so important?
Well, stretching the body is important because we were talking before we started recording the podcast, how our bodies just go through a lot day to day. Our bodies literally carry us through our entire lives. There's a famous quote, or maybe it's a meme because it's 2021 and we do a lot of communication in memes these days about how, we only get one body in our lives. We can replace pretty much everything else, but we just get this one body. And so stretching can help to elongate the life of our connective tissue. So that's what keeps our joints healthy. That's what connects the bone to bone. And it can help us to move better just as we age. From the time that we're born, we're aging through our entire lives. So we think of, exercise as something that we do to be able to eat more or to punish ourselves for eating or, to work out really hard. But I like to think of movement or stretching as just a way of life.
That's great.
Yeah, we spend a lot of our life, a lot of time, having to be still, sitting at a computer, sitting at a car, sitting on the couch, or standing, in line at the grocery store. And so stretching is really just an extension of movement, being able to dance or sing or, film a video or do something fun.
So it really sounds like people should stretch like every single day, just like how you try to drink your water every day. So talk a little bit about what are some things that they should do every day stretch-wise. Maybe not anything crazy, because when I met you, I was like, I want to learn to do the splits, Mallory. How soon can I do the splits? I mean, we're not talking about that, although that would be fun. But what about just some simple everyday stretching?
I love that analogy of drinking water. It really is that. Stretching is kind of like drinking water for your joints. You think of it that way. So anyone who, types on a phone or at a computer, just moving the fingers, like making movements with the fingers opposite of what you would for typing, going the other direction. Those are good stretches to do for the hands every day. Any type of joint movement. So making circles with the wrists, bending and extending the elbows, shrugging the shoulders, turning the head side to side. Those can be considered stretches. Those are called dynamic stretches. That just means that there's a constant movement along with breath. Not a whole lot of breath because I'm talking, but Just trying to find a part of the body that doesn't get to move a whole lot and moving that part of the body.
Is there a time of day? Like I would think so right when you wake up, but when I wake up, I'm just like, oh, I'm not even thinking and I'm just making my way to the coffee maker before I start my day. And you make me think that maybe I should start with a stretch.
Well, you said it. When people are trying to change habits, a really great tip is to anchor it to something else that you do. So since you make coffee right away, while the coffee pot or the Keurig or however you make your coffee is warming up, do a stretch then. Some clients, I'll say, while you're brushing your teeth, that might be a minute where you have, like you're just standing there brushing teeth. That might be a minute to do a spine stretch or do a hip stretch or a lower body stretch. Just something where, you might already be otherwise just scrolling through your phone or doing something else that's mindless. Just anchoring it to another task so that you're not finding 5 minutes, 10 minutes, an hour of new time or waking up early or staying up late, but just bringing into another task that you're already doing.
Oh, that makes so much sense. And it really resonates because I feel like when people think, oh, now I have to add stretching into my day, where am I going to find that time? And I like that you're saying it's okay to break it up into different parts of your day as opposed to, oh, I have to find 30 minutes right now to do that. People probably avoid that kind of commitment because it's intimidating when we already have such busy lives.
It's a huge obstacle. I mean, that was a huge obstacle for me. Like when I, prior to my injury, I just, I really hate it when people say, oh, you'll make the time for things that are important to you. Because let's be honest, I'm going to prioritize what keeps me alive, which is paying my bills, feeding myself, all of those things. At the end of the day, self-care is a luxury. It's not a necessity. And so, yeah, I want to make sure that I point that out. So finding ways to make it, to anchor it to something you're already doing can help with that. Watching TV, a lot of people, a lot of clients, I'll say, do your homework. Everyone, who watches the news or has that Netflix show that they like to watch, or, I love The Bachelor, like pick a commercial break or, 5 minutes at the beginning or the end where you'll do a couple movements, and it doesn't have to be anything elaborate, but just, find that time to move.
And then, of course, once people start this movement and they're like, this is amazing and I love how it makes me feel, what would be their next step? Is there, like there's like those stretchy tools or like those roller balls, things like that. What would be, once they're devoted to stretching, where do they go from there?
It's a good question. There's all kinds of things. It really just depends on when people ask me for what's next, I'll just ask what they enjoy. I think when it comes to movement, like you mentioned, wanting to do the splits. So if you really want to do the splits, then I would suggest, that's going to be more hip and hamstring based stretching. So I would give you some dynamic stretches to really work on, opening up the hips, the hamstrings. You might do more static holds. If somebody wanted to just, like, let's say go on, I don't know why it popped in my head, but American Ninja Warrior, then, their stretching, their movement is going to be very different. So I love to find out what motivates somebody to move. Someone in my office said just a couple weeks ago that, he just wanted to age gracefully, and he was 80 years old. And I just loved that. That's his movement program is going to be different. Some people love to just try like the latest fad, and you can get all kinds of ideas, on the internet, anything from that.
Right. So, and in my defense, I was able to do the splits like in high school. So I'm not completely crazy. And just like you said with the gentleman in your office, but as we age and we do lose some of our flexibility, obviously, what are good stretches that we should keep in our arsenal so that we're helping our bodies age well or keep them young?
Generally, hip mobility is really important in any population. Hip and spine, I would say, would be the two areas of focus. I always talk with clients, if you can get up and down from the floor without help, That is a great predictor if you want to get nerdy with me. That's a great predictor of aging healthfully. And it's also a really important fall prevention measure.
Oh, yeah, that's definitely important. I have parents who are aging and I worry about them falling all the time. I know that this is a podcast. So, and while we are Zooming right now, this will mostly be heard by people. So, is there a way that you can talk through a stretch for our listeners that will translate verbally instead of visually?
I can try. Yeah, definitely. So some of the ones that I really like, I'll just talk through some dynamic stretches. So with each one, think of taking a breath with every movement. And so if you were to just stand and move, we'll start with marches. So I always say too, if you're unsure of your balance, just be by a wall and make sure that you are in an area where you can move without knocking something over, without tripping or falling. Just make sure that you're somewhere that you can move safely. That's my biggest disclaimer as we go. And also, I'm a pretty clumsy person, so maybe everyone won't need that disclaimer, but I know I sure do. So,
I totally hear you.
So start out with just noticing the ground under both feet and noticing whether you lean more into one side than the other. Most of us do. And then from there, lengthen through the whole spine so that you're standing up really tall. And then hover one foot up off the ground. And then pull that knee up as high as you can towards your chest. So you might feel a stretch through the back of the hip. That's stretching the glute. And then when you feel that you've pulled that knee as high up as you can, go ahead and switch sides. And then you can repeat that as many times as you want. And you can start to play with the speed of that stretch and go faster and faster. The faster you go, the more you're going to challenge your balance and the more you're going to warm up, actually increase the temperature of the tissue in the hip complex. And then I just have you reverse that. So instead of bringing the knee up to the chest, I'd have you bring the leg up behind the body. So you bend the knee and pull the hip back. And that's going to stretch the front of the hip, which is a really great stretch for anybody who has to sit at all during the day, in the car, at a desk.
Right. All those people who are sitting, your body gets tired of that sitting.
Yeah. So since we talked about hip stretches, I thought those are probably the two go-tos that I would do. And if you feel really, really confident about your balance on those two stretches, you could add arms. So you could hug the knee to the chest on the first one, and on the second one, you could grab your foot behind the body with the arm.
So do you feel that the most overlooked muscles are the leg and muscles that don't get stretched as opposed to maybe shoulders or arms?
The hips probably get beat up the most just because they carry us around. People always come in and they say, my hamstrings are tight. People want to stretch their legs. So I think the legs do get stretched a lot.
I mean, that's what I think of first too. I just wondered if I should be thinking more about my arms. Or for me, when I sit at my computer for too long, and I imagine this happens to everybody, your back gets really sore. And like I'm sitting here right now thinking, I need to stretch my back.
Yeah, it's so interesting. But I would say probably the least stretched and the most needed area would be the hip flexors.
And because that supports your back then, right?
Yeah, we often think of stretching the area that hurts, but it's rarely the area that hurts that needs to be stretched.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, because when we're sitting and we're thinking of our back, usually the back is overstretched. If you're picturing your spine and we're all kind of hunched, I know I'm hunched. I'll just speak for myself. I'm kind of hunched forward talking because I'm excited. So my spine is a little bit curved forward. So the muscles in my back are overstretched because they're pulled forward. So the muscles on the front of my body are shortened. So I need to stretch my pecs and my hip flexors. And that'll take some of the stress off of my spine and the muscles in my upper back.
Wow. I had no idea that my back was overstretched. That's a really amazing tip. Now when we're done with this, I'm going to go work out my hips, which is good. Like then I could go out dancing, right? Once there is dancing again, I guess.
Yes. Or dancing at home too. That's always fun.
Right. When I think of my hips, I just think of like salsa. So I think that's why I'm thinking, ooh, now I can go salsa dancing and keep up with all those speed people. I'm sure they stretch a lot.
Yes.
And then let's think about other simple ways that people can do that. I love your thing, like while you're doing something else, brushing your teeth, making the coffee, and then the mindful minute for stretching your brain. Is there any other hack that we haven't touched on?
Those are the big ones. I think as humans, we really like to overcomplicate things. But it really is simple. It's just, try to do a minute or two a day. Anchor it to something that you're already doing. This is probably, a final hack. Move in a way that feels good. If it doesn't feel good, stop doing it.
That's great. Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of people that will come to me. I'm trying to think of all the things that people will ask, usually when they find out that I'm a stretch therapist. That'll help me think of more hacks. But usually people will ask, what they shouldn't be doing. And so that's my biggest hack with that is if something hurts, stop doing it.
Yeah, and that's funny because a lot of times I think people think when they're stretching and if it's hurting, just like with working out, oh, then I'm doing something, I'm doing something smart, better. But they're really overdoing it, right?
Yeah, if it hurts, just back off. If something is painful, then if there's like a stinging pain, you should probably see a doctor. What we forget is that our tissue is, again, like if you're stretching. We talked about connective tissue. I'm trying to think how sciencey we want to get here. But when we're stretching connective tissue, that actually shouldn't be stretched. The tissue that keeps our bones together, we don't want to stretch that tissue. That causes ligament tears. That causes strains. Those require sometimes surgery or, casts or boots to repair. So we don't want to stretch that tissue. If something causes pain, stop stretching it.
That actually seems very obvious. And yet it's really good to be told because I think people definitely forget that. You're a wealth of information.
I work with a lot of athletes, and I was a competitive swimmer myself, and I'm 34, almost 35 now. And when I was a kid, the stretches that we did, I look back now and I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we did. I can't believe we did those things to our knees and our shoulders. And it's no surprise to me now that people that I swam with then have had knee replacements in their 30s and have had shoulder problems. And it's because, our coaches then didn't know any better, but we know better now. And there's a mentality that, stretching needs to hurt, but it's actually very harmful. And, there's a lot of
don't
science.
Work through the pain.
There's a lot of science to back up that stretching should be pain-free and it should feel good. Yeah, always trust your gut on something.
But still stretch every day.
Yeah, move. I think move is a good. Yeah, because sometimes people will have an attachment. Like if they think stretch, they'll think like stretch means like, push hard, push through something. So I might then just tell someone to move every day.
That's great. The producer, Andy, gave me this great quote, and that's die young, as old as you possibly can. And certainly that mindful movement can help you get there.
I love that. I'm going to have to remember that one.
See, now we're sharing a life hack with you. This is great.
Yes.
So then if people want to find out more about you, I know that you're really active on social media. Where can they learn more about you?
So on Instagram, I'm Dr. Foxy Fit. And I post a lot of stretches and a lot of short mindfulness tips on there. I do
so much good stuff on your Instagram. I love it.
Thank you. That means a lot. Yeah, I love to just help people get moving and answer questions and all of that good stuff. So that's a great place to find me. I'm on TikTok too, but I just started and I'm kind of getting the hang of it. Same handle.
I need a TikTok lesson.
I do
TikTok
too.
Intimidates me still.
I probably need to find my 13-year-old nephew and ask him to show me how to use it.
Yes. I'm the only reason I'm on it is for my kids, and they're pros, and I feel like a total noob. So there you go. And then, of course, your website, befoxyfit.com, which will include all this stuff in the show notes so that listeners can learn all sorts of fun things about you. But your website has a lot of great information on it too.
Thank you.
So, Mallory, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on, bringing your Dr. Foxy Fit wealth of information and sharing it with the Life Hacks podcast today. It has been so great, and I learned a lot, and I'm still going to try to get the splits. And so if I do, maybe you can come back again.
Yes, I would love that. And I'm going to make a post about the splits just for you.
That's amazing. I cannot wait to see it. So I'd like to thank everybody so much for tuning into the show, and we will see you next time here at Life Hacks.